Can you bleep?
Yeah, I can bleep. Okay, so last week we talked about curiosity and being a mentee.
Yep.
The thing we didn't touch on because we ran way out of time is...
And that's a little meandering.
Sorry about that. But book review. Let's talk about some of the most pivotal books for the business and for ourselves as individuals.
Yeah. So I think I want to talk first about the 7 Habits.
Which is on the...
Yeah. So I read this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I read this in high school, and I think self-help book is a wrong title for this, because self-help book is, it can often be just kind of hippie-ish stuff, or it can be self-indulgent, or it can be just... This is a book about thinking about how you want your life to be, how you want to have a happy life and those around you, and giving you very simple, concrete, timeless principles around that. If you said to me, that you and James are talking about the Prisoner's Dilemma, you can only read 3 books, this would definitely be the first book that I would say this is the book to read. I think it's a must read, and I think the habits in it aren't just good for your professional life. I think it has one of the habits to seek first to understand, then be understood. And the idea behind that is that the deepest human need is to be understood by other people. And if you don't satisfy that need, like in an argument, then the person's it's like oxygen in a room, like they need that understanding then.
Before you can go anywhere, otherwise you get stuck in your position,
and you
in your wheels.
Just be fighting with each other. So just that alone, like that habit of, okay, let me understand your position on this thing before I try and impose my position on a thing. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. It's kind of like the guidebook to being a better human.
Yeah, and a better business person as well, as a byproduct of that. And he was just an awesome, really, brilliant guy. It's a little churchy.
So some caveats. It's not perfect. A little bit Jesus-y, a little bit God-y.
Yeah, so if you don't like
not
that,
everyone's cup of tea,
you'll find that a little challenging. But it's, even if you're a staunch atheist, it's still really worth pushing through, because the gems are so good.
The principles are for life, and he wrote that ages ago. What year did he write that? The 90s sometime?
Oh, not even.
But they still stand, like all the principles and the concepts still stand, just move forward to
Yeah, you're right, probably the late 80s.
That's all right, let's move on.
Yeah, so 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I love that book.
Gladwell. 2 Gladwell books. You could read anything by this guy. I think he's just absolutely genius.
And you can listen to his new podcast. Have you listened to Revisionist History?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
All basketballers must start shooting bucket shots for their free throws.
Did you listen to that one?
Listen to the podcast to understand that. But Blink, I think the most important message out of this book is the idea of thin slicing.
Yeah.
That we don't know why sometimes we feel a way about a thing, but more often than not, you should trust that feeling.
Yeah, you're making based on expertise, a very rapid thin slice of, okay, what's the situation going on here? What do I need to know? And the example they give is of the the head fireman runs into the building and just says to all his men, get out, and they run out, and then a second later the whole floor collapses between. And later when he's interviewed, he doesn't know why, he just knows something wasn't right.
Just had a feeling.
And it was to do with the smoke was going in a direction, like the room was really hot, but there wasn't smoke, and whatever it was that the fire was actually below them and the floor was about to collapse. And he didn't know, but he just thin sliced it and said, get out.
Which comes to the idea that when you're experienced in a thing, you don't always know why you're experienced or how you're experienced, but you just know that it's not right or it's different from normal based on the brain's ability to process fast.
Really good. But I'd read that second after this guy.
Blink by Gladwell. He's probably his best book though, I think, is this one.
Yeah. The Outliers. Was it The Outliers? I just call it The Outliers. It's actually Outliers.
It's just Outliers, yeah.
Investigating so many fascinating things. Why the Beatles became amazing. This is all about the 10,000 hours thing for competency.
Yep. He builds a lot on that principle from scientists.
And just being in the right place at the right time. And it investigates power structure dynamics with why the Korean Airlines was crashing all the time, because the pilots, the co-pilots were so polite.
They're about to crash in a plane. Like, I think we should elevate. No, we're right. I think so.
But he doesn't even do that. He goes, the black box transcript before this guy dies, before they all plow into a mountain, is, the visibility's not very good today. Like, he's trying to hint Like, he doesn't even say what you said.
Yeah, I was wrong. Yeah.
It just tries to. And what they realised in Korea Airlines was that Koreans have an incredibly high respect for power and authority, and so what they had to do to go from being the worst to being a decent airline was you weren't allowed to call the captain anymore. They had to have all these strategies to reduce the power dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot in Australian culture because we are a lower power, because we're settled by convicts, we have an inherent distrust of authority. And compared to Americans who are very, like if we were in America, I would be called Coach McInnes. And like it's very, and we have kids of ours go over it, like we have one of our kids, and you know who you are, I'm gonna link you privately in this, who went over and said to the head coach of a Division 1 college, I'm going to call you Noodles. And I tried to give the coach a nickname. Yeah, and he's just like, no, we don't give our head coaches a nickname.
It's Coach Noodles. So Allies, the other really cool thing is the 10,000 hour rule, and also the direct correlation in ice hockey between age and how good you are. Yeah. That people born earlier in the year develop like they're bigger earlier, so they get more opportunities, so they get fed forward into the professional leagues. And so it's like January passes to February, passes to March, back to January to the other January. Like if you use just their months instead of their names.
And when you start looking for it, like so Igor Hadzimirovic is now playing for Melbourne United, January 1. That's a good birthday.
It's perfect. Whereas my brother, December 28th, and he was the opposite. He was the kids 3 days younger than him. He was a monster. And you occasionally have bad birthdays. So Andrew Bogut, I think he's like an October birthday. Yeah, so going through the juniors, that helps explain why he was a little bit overlooked as well. There's just he was a little bit late. Have you finished this yet, or is that your bookmark still there? This book, though, I don't think you need to read. You just need the title. Like seriously, I read it all, and like Simon Sinek, you've done a brilliant job.
I've watched his TED Talk. His TED Talk's really good.
The TED Talk's probably faster than this as well. Yeah. Start with why. We use this all the time when we're thinking about exercise, when we're thinking about programming, when we're thinking about the internship.
It's the title of Mike Boyle's latest Functional Strength Coach, Volume 7 or whatever it is. It's called Start With Why. Yeah.
Whatever you do, however you're going to program or do a thing, go back to, it's also called first principles sometimes. Start with why you're doing that thing. So if it's, like we've been talking a lot about back squatting here, for example.
Anything.
Yeah. Start with why you're doing it. What are you trying to get out of it? What are you trying to achieve? And then work towards your methods, your equipment, your rationale later from there.
And I love Boyle's interpretation. He takes it and he says, so if you're a guy that's all about just kettlebells, then you're a start with what guy, not a start with why. And I think it's start with why is great, but you also to be able to point out, are we doing start with what? Like that's that's a trap you fall into.
We sometimes call that first principles as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful book. Yeah. It's one of my favourites.
It's really, really good.
That one? That's the lighter one.
So this is Bill Bryson's Short History of Nearly Everything. It's an explanation of the history of the universe, but don't let that put you off. But mostly it's really about meeting with the scientists and understanding. It's an investigation, exploration, and celebration of science because it's finding out how we know how old the world is
and the characters behind it as well.
And it's funny. It's great. I have two. I've got an illustrated copy and a non-illustrated. Both brilliant. It's just a great read. I really love it.
Let's get on to these ones last. I think this is my last one I'm going to do.
Okay, cool.
This is not so much a shout out to the 4-Hour Chef per se, but more Tim Ferriss. And his influence on us as a company. This book, The 4-Hour Chef, it's about cooking, but it's not. It's about how to best learn anything, and he uses cooking and preparing food as the vehicle for that. So when you're preparing food or cooking or whatever it is you're doing,
Tommy, can you get the door?
Okay. He has 3 books. The 4-Hour Body, The 4-Hour Work Week, and The 4-Hour Chef. The 4-Hour Chef is all about learning. How you can best hack learning to make it more efficient, more enjoyable, and ultimately more successful. He has a podcast as well, which he interviews world-class people who do world-class things. Podcasts, each episode when it comes out, like, oh my god, have you heard the episode? It's crazy. This book is long. The first chapter, which is in green, is probably the only one you need to read when it comes to learning. The rest is all about chefing. So really, it's only that thick. But all 3 of his books I found life-changing, phenomenal.
Really, really interesting thing. And just that idea of everyone will do a thing a certain way, and he'll go, well, is that really the best way to learn that? I think that's really, really good.
And it kind of starts with one and works its way
And
backwards.
you've been quite heavily influenced by him for the structure of the internship.
Yeah.
Because when we did version 5.0, we kind of tore up everything else we'd ever done and just started, okay, what do we want to achieve? Why? How?
Yeah. And that book I actually was reading at the time, and I used as an influence for the structure that the internship is now in. Yeah.
Yeah, which is getting people practically useful so they can start the process of feeling comfortable as coaches. Because coaching is just getting the reps in.
And so the sooner you can feel comfortable on the floor and feel practically useful, the more the theory will stick because you're applying it every session, multiple times a week.
This book, Anatomy of Movement by Calais Germain, what's it? Blandine Calais Germain, I think that's how you would say it. A French, I think, physio and Pilates instructor. This was my first anatomy text. And I remember when we were chatting about it to Rob, who used to work here, who's now doing his master's in physio, and Rob's an anatomy, probably called anatomy guru.
Yeah, phenomenal.
And when he was like, oh my god, that was your first, he was like, that's just the best anatomy textbook ever, because it's really simple pictures.
The psoas one, get the psoas one.
Do you want to we do a...
If I hold it up, I can do a crop. So that's the images of the psoas.
And just simple that you can understand exactly what each... I think my thinking about functional anatomy is always coming back to job descriptions of muscles. Job descriptions and troubleshooting. And I think this book does a better job than any other book I've come across of helping you think of muscles in terms of their job description.
Not just it flexes the hip.
Yeah,
what it actually does when it comes to sprinting or jumping or lifting. Yep.
Yeah, just amazing book. Incredibly well spent money on that one. It's teetering a bit. I'm gonna go
finish that one.
It's really strong. Yeah. This is Zatsiorsky and Kramer's book, Science and Practice of Strength Training. I think it's brilliant. It's simple. Some of the stuff's outdated. Some of the core stuff predates our understanding of really the function of the core.
And that's one of the big problems with books in general, is that by the time it's written, it's already kind of a year or so out of date.
But this is still a gold standard, I think, for so many reasons. And I like to be crystal clear, this isn't an exhaustive list of all the good books. This is just the favourite ones that we just put off the bookshelf.
It happened to be right there.
Yeah. But those ones, they're great. And last, Mike Boyle. So I've never met Mike Boyle, but he is definitely a mentor to me.
Myself included.
I've bought everything he's ever produced. I first read his book in 2003, Functional Strength Training for Sports. And a new edition has just come out, so I'm desperate to buy that. This is called Advances in Functional Training. This is a bit more towards the coach, whereas Functional Training for Sports was kind of half and half coach or athlete. It was more consumer grade, I suppose. His book was absolutely amazing, and the new one will be really good as well. What it was I was like, here's someone who's twice as smart as me, but thinks along the same lines, but is 15 years ahead of me in his career. And yeah, if I hadn't read that book, I think I would still be doing so many stupid things. He really pushed me along. The only thing was, I'm forever regretting I didn't get in touch with him, because the only thing was he was very anti-static stretching. And I'm like, this is amazing, but I politely disagree. And then about 5 years later, I saw him talk about, I think he had completely done a backflip on static stretching and how it was really valuable from a DOM's point of view, from an injury.
I read a quote on Instagram actually a couple of days ago. It said, it was a blog quote that said, static stretching isn't about the effects right now, it's about preventing injury 6 months from now.
Yeah. And I wish I'd reached out, because I was ahead on nothing. But yeah, he's an amazing person to follow. All of his writing's really good. I've almost never disagreed with what he says. He's just very, very switched on.
Yeah. So this is kind of a placeholder for the new one, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this one and then the new one, which will exist soon.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
A brief and not even close to exhaustive book review.
Yeah, very.
And we can totally do a part B to this now as well.
Okay, cool. Yes.